Hello, my name is Tajan Kamara, and today we are going to look at a case study in nutrition and assessment and some of the errors encountered in dietary assessment method, most significantly the 24 hours food recall and 3 days food records dietary assessment method. Before we go further, I would like us to look at some of the data, why it is very important to monitor diet. In this slide, there is an overview of overweight and obesity in Australia. As you can see, BMI distribution among age 18 and over since 1995 to 2018. There is a gradual increase in overweight and obesity in Australia since 1995 to 2017. Some of the statistics highlighted here that 67% of Australia age 18 and over, they are either overweight and obese. And males tends to be more overweight and obese as compared to their female counterparts. Younger adults also tends to be more obese and overweight as compared to older Australian. As you can see in the graph, overweight and obesity is increased. In 2017 and 18, more people heading towards obesity range. Why it is important to monitor nutritional intake? It is important to monitor nutritional intake for healthy eating. Healthy eating can help you minimize the risk of chronic disease, such as high blood pressure, diabetes, metabolic syndrome. Monitoring nutritional intake can also provide the necessary information for you to able to understand which type of mineral and vitamin you consume, such as carbohydrates, legume, fruit, protein, and all those short form of things. Information acquired from the monitoring can be used to identify the risk of nutritional problem, especially with epidemiologists. Epidemiologists have the opportunity, if you able to have an accurate information about your nutritional intake, so they can able to research and give us appropriate feedbacks in relation to how we can able to consume our food intake. This information is also important to compare the relationship between nutritional state and disease status, such as obesity and metabolism. It also helps us to create awareness in terms of weight loss and how we can prevent weight gain. We perform a 3 days case study in monitoring nutritional intake. Let me introduce you to my participant. He is a young male, university student, and he is living in the campus. And I have highlighted some of the key sections of concern here. As you can see, he's living in the campus alone, and he's a bit overweight. He's overweight. He also have a family history of type 2 diabetes, and he consumes a lot of stationary food, which doesn't look good for him, and he doesn't drink a lot of water. And these are some of issues of concerns, because when you look at this, all the points I highlighted above, it indicates some of the problems that causes overweight and chronic diseases in the future. So these are very challenging things. That's why I just highlight them in the slide here. so that we can have a look at some of the unhealthy behaviors he engaged in. Consuming a lot of snacks, skip meals, consume fast foods, and all these problems are highlighted can result to some of these problem of chronic diseases. And maybe it might be as because he's in the university, there is too much stress as university student, too much workloads, people don't have time to cook, to do other stuff. So that's why he consumes a lot of carbs. And this is my participant. What are some of the assessment methods used in the case study? We use 24 hours, past 24 hours food record and a 3 days food, 24 hours food recall and a 3 days food records. The 24 hours food record, the participant record all the type of food he consumed during the 24 hours, and there is a date and time, quantity of food. And in the 3 days food record, there is a subjective record for food consumed in 3 days, record food intake for 2 days, 2 weekdays and 1 weekend. And the 24 hours food record is not much more in-depth as compared to the 3 days food record, because in the 3 days food records give us some kind of time to able to analyze more that data into details as compared to the 24 hours food record. What are the problems we encounter within the 24 hours recall and 3 days food records? Participant admitted that he can't remember exactly the quantity of meal he consumed the previous day. And I can't determine neither this result is accurate or not. And in the 3 days food recall, the individual was not motivated because he told me that the 3 days is a bit bored to record everything, and he got tired of remembering all what he has to consume and what he need to write and measure everything, and as compared to the 24 hours recall. And he also can't able to specify the type of sports supplements he consumed. He just put a sachet, and he did not indicate what type of sachet he consumed, because I don't know if it's creatinine based or something else. And he did not indicate neither the food was cooked or not cooked. And I can't able to determine his information because it's an individual self-feedback. So I just took what he told me and what he wrote on the paper. That's what I'm using for my presentation. And he can't specify food measurement also. So these are some of the problems I encounter with my participant during the 24 hours food recall and 3 days food record. Is the 24 hours food recall reliable? Now let's look at some of the advantages and disadvantages. Let's look at the advantages first. The first advantage is cheaper and quicker. It does not require technology to use the recall. It can easily be done by the individual. It doesn't require literacy for the individual to do the recall. And this information can be used some of the nutritionists and epidemiologists in order to know what are the risk of diseases and other chronic conditions. And it also helps us to know the relationship between what a good diet is, what a bad diet is. And it also helps us to prevent the risk of the individuals in getting chronic diseases. So let's look at the disadvantages. Because it's mostly depend on somebody to have to remember what is going to happen, and most people, they can't able to recall, as what I got in my own participant, because he can't able to remember all what has happening. And a single collection of dietary intake in 24 hours is not seems to be efficient, because it's just a one-day period. You can't able to see the bigger picture of what is happening as compare if you continue to do it more. It's difficult for participants to precisely estimate what type of food they eat, and some of them, they will not able to tell you exactly because what type of food they consume. Sometimes maybe they consume a large type of unhealthy diets, but they will not able to tell us exactly what type of food they consume. And just based on, because sometimes maybe they hang out with friends, they go for a party, or they have a family reunion, so that makes it hard. So during my 24 hours food recall, some of the challenges I face, and these are some of the disadvantages and advantages during the 24 hours food recall are highlighted in this slide. Is the 3 days food records reliable? And again, let's look at some of the advantages and disadvantages of the 3 days food record. Let's look at the advantages first. Because it's a repeated thing, it seems to look more accurate, because if you can't get a proper record in the first day, maybe you try to manage in the second day, or you try to do much better in the third day. It has specific period of information that's given, that at a particular time, let me say like the 2 weekdays or a weekend. And it also gives us detailed information about what to do in terms of food records. The information collected can also be used by some of the allied health professionals to conduct a guideline in terms of Australian food guideline, what needs to be consumed, what doesn't need to be consumed. And let's look at the disadvantages. It's really a costly method, because during a 3 days period, food recall records is going to cost some money, and it's also going to take a lot of time from people. And as what I got with my participant the last time, he forgot and he mistakenly hung out with a friend, and I got a problem with him for him to feel motivated to do the recall. And people also may be biased, because they will feel so boring in terms of doing all this kind of stuff, so they will not feel comfortable. And sometimes this thing require high amount of literacy for somebody to be doing during the 3 days food record. And these are some of my advantages and disadvantages during the 3 days food record in this slide. During our 24 hours food recall, we encounter some issues in our studies. These are some of the recommendations that I may highlight. Manual dietary assessments. Example, the use of apps, web page, by using pictures, videos, etc. Dietitian support assessments by taking photo of food, sending them directly to dietitian in order to able to assess what type of food we eat. Variable device monitoring. The use of this involved device can measure eating behavior to enable less biased nutritional intake. Self-reporting. Here is the comparison of participants' food intake in relation to Australian guidelines. Participants consume less fruits, less vegetable, increased carbohydrate consumption, excess consumption of dietary food. Here are some advice for my participants. Participants need to have less grains, increase fruit intake. Participants have to be less in discretionary food. Participants need to consume more vegetable. Participants need to drink a lot of fluid, example water, and participants need to do enough exercise. My participant is a 19 years old male. As you can see in this data, this group tends to consume more sweet drinks and less vegetable and fruit. BMI is used to classify weights. As you can see, my participant BMI is 28.4, which is overweight. My participant waist circumference is 96 centimeters, which is at risk of developing chronic disease. To conclude, it is important to monitor our dietary intake in the population because it can help us to reduce the risk of chronic diseases such as cholesterol, diabetes, high blood pressure. Dietary assessment methods are also useful tools to monitor the population diet pattern and dietary risks of nutritional disease. Dietary intake is difficult to measure. Therefore, we need appropriate equipment to be used to minimize the risk of bias and errors. Such instruments are cameras and apps, etc. Measure the BMI and wrist circumference is important because it can help us to detect early chronic disease in our population. I thank you all to listening to my presentation. I hope this will help you to have an understanding about why it is important to monitor our food intake in our population. Thank you for listening to my presentation.